not terrible. That's so annoying. I wish I could change that. And someday when I figure out how to do that, I will. Okay, this is going to be fun. You have the Tabasco. We may or may not get to the Tabasco. We'll work up to that. But I want to go through a drawing, a skeletal letter drawing exercise. Did I show you the accelerated video of me drawing skeletal letters and then drawing them obliquely? Okay, I'm going to do that now. Okay, so my YouTube channel, I'm going to put it in the chat. It's youtube.com crosstown art, all one word. And it looks like you don't need it straight away, but I just want you to be aware that there's a 400 or so lessons there, many of which are interior design communication. Okay. And I will email you this playlist. Let me do that now. So, Maybe I don't have it here. I know that it was in my portfolio, so let me go to that. This is what we're going to do today. This is at double speed. You're going to make these little squares, rectangles, and you're going to try to control them. And then into the rectangles, we're going to draw skeletal letter forms, right? Looks easy when you've practiced it 100 times and you play it at fast speed. So the idea here is that we're in an effort to understand the geometry Okay, that's the first part of the exercise. Then the second part of the exercise, we're going to take those letter forms and try to transform them obliquely. Does everybody know what I mean by oblique? Oblique. Oblique means English is a wonderful language. And the language is very rich with terms. And oblique, basically what it means is inclined at an angle. So with respect to typeface, it means italicized. Typeface that's oblique, like a Century Gothic oblique, usually means it is the italicized version of that typeface. It's at an angle. A more subtle use of the word is an oblique reference to something, means kind of a slanted, sidelong, indirect reference to something. Enough about English. The second part of this, you're going to create slanted rectangles into which we're going to draw the same letter forms. This time we're going to pay attention to how the geometry of those letters are transformed. Some letters obviously are easier than others. If you have a question, or at some point during the semester, maybe during this class, I have to be able to see your work. Does everybody have some kind of way of showing me something they're doing? I mean, the most basic way to do that would be to hold up your drawing to the camera. I don't know if you have other devices that allow you. We can negotiate that. It's not that important, as important in this class as it will be in studio later on. Actually, hopefully, by the time we get to studio classes. Anybody no, you don't, freshman year, you don't take studio yet, right? Nobody's in interior design studio. Anyway, if you need to show me something, if you need to hold something up to the camera, I want to be able to see that you're following along with the exercise. Okay. So now the screen I'm going to share I'm going to go over to my drawing table. I'm going to do this skeletal letter form exercise. Almost makes it. All right. First thing you want to do is begin to set up your a grid. Don't be afraid to make a mistake and go back and change it. If you want to yell something out, feel free to do that. My speakers are on. I'm probably going to be speaking loud. These are what are called drafting dots. You can't see me. But believe me, I'm here. Normally there are exercises that lead up to this. So one of the ways I warm up, I don't know why I keep looking over there as if you can see me. I'm talking in that direction. One of the ways I warm up to this thing is to just sort of draw some rectangles. Try to draw rectangles about the same size. So you get comfortable. If you feel the need to use a straight edge, I don't want you to rely on it, but it's okay to do this to check, right? Let's see.
Should we be doing this on regular paper or tracing paper?
You don't need to do this on trace. Very good question. You can do it on trace if you like. The reason I use trace in the light table so that you guys can see what I'm doing, and the lights from above don't cast shadows. But you can do this on regular plain paper. You don't have to use high quality paper, but someday you might make something really, really special and wish you had done it on good paper. But for the warm-up exercise, it's not a big deal. You can use printer paper. whatever you like. So all I'm doing here is getting comfortable that I can make some rectangles that are proportionately similar. Then you want to lay out some lines. And start to create that grid. How big should these be? Well, if I have an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, which I should be able to manage to find somewhere. This is about that big. See, here's the reason I use trace paper, because it just casts crazy shadows. Let me draw the outline of what's about. Let's imagine that this is about 11 inches, this is about 8.5 inches. I don't know why I'm getting that black, but you can see what I'm doing. So I need 26 letters. One way to start is try to evenly space some parallel lines. See, when you make these divisions, that one's too small, I can tell. I made a mistake. Don't be afraid to draw over what you already drew. You don't have to do this in pen. You can do it in pencil. I'm doing it in pen so you can clearly see what I'm doing. Let me see. 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12. How many letters are there? 26?
Yep.
Thank you. When I was born, there was only 49 states. You can Google that. You can Google that and figure that out. What does that mean? That I should know how many letters there are in the alphabet? Probably, yeah. All right, 13. That might do. I have a friend, his name is Frank Ching. You may have heard of him. He writes books about architecture, and he uses this fountain pen. It's called Lamy Vista. He's left-handed, and he uses the nib, a medium nib upside down. Creates really exquisite drawings. Look up a site called Frank. Wait a minute. You picked the best. You picked the best profession. Did I tell you that already? I told you that. When you have time, go to a site called Frank Ching.com. Lamy Vista medium point nib. The nib is that part of the pen. One way I like to check how my rectangles are coming out is to highlight a couple of them and see how they look. Kind of like Wheel of Fortune. Is it Wheel of Fortune? Is that the game where they guess the letters? Right? I could even trace over one of my rectangles. Look at some of the others. You see, you want to maintain that. You want to maintain that kind of control. That kind of control over the relative size of those. How are we doing? How many people need more time to lay out the rectangles?
Would you recommend redoing it if they don't look great, or just kind of go with what we have?
Let me see what you got. I will stop sharing my screen. Let's see how we're doing on these. That's not bad. What I'd recommend, Catherine, is that practice drawing some straight lines because you're losing control of the line a little bit. The general guide, so that if you were to let me pull up my screen again. In a regular drawing class, I would do this all separately, but what you want to do is, when you draw a line, don't do this. You don't want this windshield wiper type thing to go from place to place. You want to maintain You see how I'm moving all parts of my hand? There's compensation in the wrist, in the fingers, in the elbow, in the shoulder, when you're drawing straight lines. So try to really control that initial line. You don't have to do it over, but you may want to practice that. Does anybody else want to show me what they're up to? Or we'll just wait. Yeah, go ahead, Emily.
I did a couple because I'm just practicing. Can you see that bottom one?
Yeah. We'll see how the bottom one has improved over the other,
Mm-hmm.
right? Don't worry. You don't need to make the lines really heavy, but don't be afraid to go over lines you already made, because
Okay.
usually it doesn't help to bold, go in and bold that line, but it's more effective. Okay, let me see. Well, that's cool. So I was able to see your screen, and my screen is still up. So let me explain what I'm saying. When you draw a rectangle or two, and you decide, all right, this one's not. Let me do this. This is what you want to avoid. You don't want to do that. What you do want to do is if you think that one's not quite. Wait a minute. I answered the door from my mother. Well, that's good that they found out. Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So instead of blackening in a square like that, you decide this one is not quite right. Draw another line. Draw another line. Another line. And then you use that. Somebody else want to post something? Show me something. Janet, did you want to show me?
Yeah, so I'll have it on my sketchbook here.
Very good. Yeah. So the more control you have over that form, the so we're basically what we're laying out as a framework for the letter forms. This is common, by the way. It's not just to architecture, graphic design, typography. All these things are connected together in a really elegant and beautiful way. Right? So these are things you think, what the heck am I doing letters for? This is going to come in handy. somewhere down the line, because we're going to understand when we turn these letters around in 3D space, how they transform. And when we understand that letters are a familiar, habitual mark that we make with which we can understand, what happens, how those transformations, how that geometry transforms. All right. So the next step is, once you have a reasonable set of 26 rectangles, it could be squares, it could be rectangles. I mean, letter forms are generally a little bit taller than they are wide, right? Then you're going to begin. So the letter A. Let's talk about what these forms are. I'm going to go off to one side now and just talk a little bit about. Right, the letter A. You expect the top of that A to begin in the middle there. Right? How do I know what the middle of that form is? One way to find out is to draw diagonals and then a line straight through. That divides it in half. If you want the stem to be in the middle, you would draw it about the midpoint. So there's my skeletal letter A. B. It divides in half vertically, right? And then you usually have these semicircles. Do you see how I'm subtracting out the parts of the letter? You think when you draw A, B, C, D, you go, and you start in one place and you go on. We're looking at what makes up the shape of those letters. There's a vertical element. Right? So that's what this is what I said E is. There are a couple of half circles. Maybe they're a little bit tighter than that, actually. The letter C, O, Q. There's a unique problem of inscribing a circular shape inside a rectangle. That means that there are 4 points that are tangent. That is a tangent. That is a tangent to the edge of a circular shape. If I were to draw a circle, in a square. These points are points of tangency. It's amazing what kind of control you can get over a circle when you consider it as it's inscribed inside a square. Now it's a little bit more difficult in a rectangle because a rectangle is taller. The rectangle that encloses the letter forms a bit taller than it is wide. I'll give you a sneak preview of how is this relevant to Tabasco. The problem is to locate the middle, the center point, Tabasco. T. O. Live somewhere outside of that square. These letter forms are probably a little taller. I'm doing this in very sloppy fashion. Do you see what I'm thinking through? I'm thinking about that. This is a beautiful bottle. I mean, if you like Tabasco sauce, you're that much luckier. But if in terms of what's going on with these things, one of the most complicated things that happens to letters is their projection on a circular surface. But we're going to deal with that later. Right? We're understanding it right now in a very, very essential, primordial. I've never used the word in that context, but I think that's what I mean. In a very primitive way, we're understanding what we're doing with these forms. So I could think of the points of tangency, maybe draw the circle and just emphasize, right? I'm going to ruin this, but this to provide the emphasis, right? A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y. Hey, you're right. There are 26 letters. So now I can start to organize this and, okay, my Q, well, I've already solved that problem. The O, no problem, easy peasy. X, baby food, right? depends on how you want to solve some of these others. Just be consistent, whatever it is that you decide. Maybe the Y wants me to descend it. I'm cutting through my trace. Those are the points of tangency. The letter M presents something of a problem because in actuality, most typefaces, it doesn't fit into the same horizontal space of the regular letter forms, but for purposes of this exercise, we're going to make it fit. Same with the letter W. Divide this thing in half, and half again. V is just a letter A upside down without the crossbar. The letter S presents a really unusual problem. And there are lots of different ways to go about solving it. One way to think about it is a form of overlapping ellipses I've seen this done more than one way. So there's an ellipse. In this case, they're tangent. And this, they intersect. I can't remember which one I used, but then there's a point of inflection where it reverses direction. I think that one is probably going to work best. And if you find that confusing, take another piece of trace to it and see what is that result. We can get it pretty accurate. Again, there's a shape that encloses it, the shape that divides it in two. Anybody want to share something or take your time with it, or tell you what, we'll take a 10 or 15-minute break and we'll continue this afterwards. You have an idea what we're after now, right? Okay. We'll be back at 5:35. All right. Let's kind of see everybody kind of hold up their work so far, or drawing so far. See how that's going. Janet, could you tilt toward the monitor a bit? Yeah, Dynamite.
So cute. So cute.
All right. You know what's wonderful? Every single one of you has this problem in hand. You have control over the letter forms, and I'm really delighted to see that do you see how with a little bit of forethought in just sort of setting up that grid helps to set up the frame, the platform, the staging, if you will, for the problem, and that's what happens. Very elegantly solved. Uh, okay. Now we're going to go in and set up the oblique grid. I guess I'm still sharing my screen, even though I can't tell because there's so many things going on. Oh no, I don't see it. What happened? I'm back. Okay. Oh boy. Get a light. Lamp. All right, I promise you I'm going to solve the camera problems once I get the proper camera. I've ordered 3 different ones. One of them's got to work. So meanwhile, I'm fighting the light of the drafting table. But you'll be able to see what I'm doing. Okay. No, that's not good. All right. More drastic, we need a more drastic measure. Drastic measure. Don't try this at home, even though I'm doing this at home. It'll work. Okay. You guys know who Julia Child is? Does anybody know who Julia Child is? Think of me as like the French chef. I'm improvising as we go. You know how Julia Child just goes, oh, we'll cook the chicken in the pot, and oh, we don't have a pot, so we'll use this container of the bathtub. So we're improvising. When I lived in Cambridge, Massachusetts, when I went to college, she and I shopped at the same supermarket. Big deal. All right. Another useless fact. The oblique grid, so we're not going to do any kind of foreshortening, but I'm using the same proportions, if you will. Again, it really doesn't matter how you construct this as long as you come up with some kind of system. So the idea is a little more difficult. you don't have to follow the same format that I'm doing. I'm just using the work I already did in terms of spacing to kind of translate that down to the oblique, to solving the oblique problem. I think I've lost it. Let me see. Take one or two of them. So now I'm improvising a little bit. I'm trusting the marks I already made on the page, and I'm responding to those marks. And when you're drawing, when you're creating a work of art like that, it's okay to do that. So we're not trying to land somebody on the moon, right? We're not trying to achieve that type of exactitude, but what we're trying to do is basically maintain some kind of control over the proportions and the size of those forms to the point where you make a compelling presentation. So be kind to yourself. Give yourself a break that this isn't coming out perfectly right. Who cares? With a line, with letters that are composed basically of lines, this problem is easy, right? You find the midpoint by construction. And you identify, and the horizontals maintain the same ratio. What you draw from the end point to the midpoint. So what happens here? For line, letters that are composed of lines is fairly easy, but what happens with curves is much more interesting. I'm going to draw a circle in a square. The easiest way to draw a square is to draw 4 equal parts and then draw the tangents. So the question is, what happens to that shape and it gets translated to an oblique projection? The way to solve the problem is to understand the points of inflection, the points of tangency. Those are the points where the curve is tangent. The midpoints still the same. The intersection of the diagonals still generate the midpoint. But notice what happens to the points of tangency. And this is one of the very beautiful problems of geometric projections. This becomes, the circle becomes an ellipse. An ellipse whose major and minor axis are now oblique. But the points of tangency are still the same. But what happens I'm drawing the major axis the minor axis right? That's from here to here is the short axis. The tangency still remains the same, but what happens, here's what happens in this space. And these are what are called spandrels. And here, the curve gets elongated. And here, it's compressed. And the reverse happens on the bottom. That curve is elongated. This curve is compressed. If you can solve that problem for a circle, you can do the whole alphabet. Do you see why? Because everything is made up of those parts. I haven't done a very good job at drawing this. But the letter B. Or two ellipses. They're compressed and elongated. Compressed and elongated. Not terribly good. Like I said, we're not NASA. We're not trying to land somebody on the moon. But this is, do you see what's going on with those shapes? Do you see how the fundamental, there are lines and curves. Anything you can represent in 3D space are lines and curves. It's all a matter of where are they with respect to me on the picture plane. So if you can do them with letter forms, you can manage them with just about everything. Take your time with it. Be kind to yourself with it. Why did I jump to the curve straight away? Because the letters are easy peasy, right? Anybody can draw lines, but it takes some sophistication and thought and planning visually to persuade the viewer that those curves are actually turning in 3D space the way that you want them to turn. And what else turns that way? There might be a burner on a stove, right? There might be a tea kettle that sits on top of it. I'm terrible at drawing tea kettles. I shouldn't have tried that. I just butchered that I destroyed that tea kettle. But the idea is simple. You make associations that you recognize in the letter forms. These are 3D shapes, and they get transformed. And what we'll do, you've probably seen these things as a kid. There's a different type of letter that's constructed in a different way. Well, I'm going to save that for next time. But you know those little blocks? The kids have when they play A, B, C, if we divide that letter into thirds, we can look at letter forms that look like that. It's basically, these are basically, that's basically an elaboration of the skeletal letter, but it's divided up into parts. That's called a Bodoni type. Thirds. I'll get into that in a different class. But what I'd like for you guys to concern yourselves with, okay, we understand these shapes in their orthogonal projection. What if we bend them? We're bending them in an unrealistic way. We're not bending them in perspective, which means the parts at the back would be smaller, right? This is not the perspective projection would be something like that. The lines go and they converge somewhere far away. This is perspective. The same rules apply. Tangent, tangent, tangent. But we're not going to go there yet, because this is a ton of work already. right? How many people want homework? Raise your hand. I don't think anybody's ever raised it. I've asked this question at the beginning of every class. I don't think anybody's ever raised their hand. I'm happy to do during class, whatever work. I can only try to stimulate your interest in this stuff. I'm hoping to get you to look at things that you see every day in a slightly different way and start to think about how you can apply them in drawing. How you can think about a shape, a couch, an object. Think about for the box that it lives in, and then you can figure the rest of that out. I'm not going to introduce anything new. I'll let you guys continue with that. If you want to show me something, pull something up on the screen and I'll respond to it. I get the sense that you understand where we're going with this, and that's what's important. Yes, Skylar.
Can I just show you what I have so far?
Yeah,
Please?
yeah, dynamite.
Okay, so it's like this line down here.
That's quite good. I think, by the way, I haven't said, I take these things and I do one level of oblique scan and then I try to push it more slanted, but you have the right idea. I think you're losing a little bit of control on the letter B as in baby. You see how those forms. Did you see what I did with the B in my drawing? You see how you got to take the little circular parts of it and do each transformation. So that gets bent, again, compressed, elongated. Compressed, elongate that curve.
Okay, I see that. I see what you're saying now.
Yeah, they're flattening out just a little bit, but otherwise the other shapes are quite good.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, not at all. Yes, Emily.
Could I show you mine too, quick?
Yeah.
I've done kind of a lot.
Okay. Same idea. The B and the D. B as in baby, D as in dog.
Mm-hmm.
What's going to happen with that D? What you want to happen with your D, I'm going to draw it. I'm going on memory, but what you got is something like that, right? What you want that curve gets compressed over here. That gets compressed. Then when you get down here, it gets elongated, long. So that's compressed. That gets elongated. So show me that drawing again.
I just did what you just showed right there. That might be a little better.
Dynamite. Beautiful.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, Catherine. Oh, I thought you were going to show me something. Okay. Take your time, guys. I want you to have fun with this, and we're going to go to some really useful places with these things. If you can do them with letter forms, you can do them. Then you learn to recognize that letter form in everything you see. that guitar over there, right? That the hole in that guitar. I'm going to take the guitar and turn it a little more obliquely. Let's get this one out of the way. Maybe not quite so oblique. So the hole in that guitar, if I were drawing it straight on, that's a circle. That's a circle if I look at it straight on. But because I'm looking at it like that, you see what happens to it? It's the letter O. This is like Sesame Street. O for guitar. G for guitar. G, U. Sesame Street. You guys know Sesame Street? Was that still around? No. Then you know you'll never look at a guitar the same way now. You look at a guitar and say, "Oh, that's a letter O." We did that in class with the skeletal letters. That's all I'm trying to get us to do is to recognize those shapes in a familiar mark, something that we do every day. Now we're going to understand how to transform them and move them into 3D space.
Can I show you mine?
Great. The letter O, again, be a little bit careful with the O is kind of coming a little too orthographic. You have it, you have the G and the letter C. The O is kind of flattened out. For the most part, it's very effective. So it's a little easy to look, and maybe the top part of the D as in dog could be a little more compressed at the top and elongated at the bottom. You know what I mean by compressed and elongated, right? Those things are really going to be important when you're creating. There's another drawing I made. I think I showed it in my portfolio. Let me see. Um, you see this drawing, the camera, the circular shapes, because I understood what is happening with the letter forms, I figured out how those ellipses would be placed. They give you the sense of the camera tilting. If I look at the camera straight on, that's a circle. When I tilt the camera, I don't know how to get what I have in the drawing. But when I tilt the camera this way, see how that becomes an ellipse, the front of that? That's what I'm trying to get us to understand, right? So once you understand that, these drawings become the problem of solving the projection of that circle. And it's the letter O. It's the hole in the guitar. It's the little knobs that don't exist anymore in cameras because they don't have knobs. It's all digital now. This one that I used to own was all analog. But those are all letter forms. Even the letters described there follow the slanted alphabet that we just made. But do you see how being able to make those slanted letter forms allows you to draw a camera? You can draw this thing. You draw the box, you draw the circular shapes that it's composed of. I didn't invent these problems. I had a drawing instructor in college who studied with a guy named Joseph Alberts. Look up one day Joseph Alberts. Search versus research. In the 40s and 50s, he taught my drawing instructor how to work and study letter forms. Maybe that's a little bit difficult to see. Anyways, I will post examples of this. So this is thinking that started at the Bauhaus. You probably heard of Bauhaus. And they taught people about color and drawing and understanding form. This all started a long time ago. I inherited and I carry very gently the custody knowledge of these exercises that I try to teach, that I impart to students like you of design, of architecture, in a way of understanding visual communication. That's what it's all about. Natasha, does your shirt say Trinity?
Yeah. So I studied at the Madrid campus for my first 2 years. So I
Okay,
got to travel a lot, and so I visited the library there.
these were lectures given at Trinity College in 1969.
Oh,
Yeah, it's really wonderful. And I will post a link to the images in this book. Have to do with not just letter forms, but the juxtaposition of color. A lot of wonderful color exercises. Alas, we don't have time to get into all of it. So, I hope you have a good idea of what this class is about. We're gonna proceed very slowly. We're gonna all get on the same boat. We're gonna go to shore together. We're all gonna get there at the same time. So I want you to feel confident about that, and I look forward to seeing you again on Thursday.
Professor, do you want us to like submit these anywhere, or do we just keep them for ourselves?
Nobody raised their hand that they wanted homework, so you're not going to have to submit them. So you're going to have to, let's continue to work on them and maybe incorporate them into your final presentation as a study drawing. All right?
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I'll see you guys on Thursday.
Is class once a week or do we have class on Thursday?
Oh, I'll see you next Tuesday.
Okay, just wanted to be sure.
Sorry about that.
That's okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It seemed like a really sweet bunch.